Imagine you're in a classroom where every single one of those students speaks a foreign language that you don't fully understand. The professor asked you a question. After a whole bunch of calculations, you answered it, thinking, nailed it, because you think you know every single step of it. But for some reasons, every single one of the students just started laughing at you. Some guys at the corner even started making fun of you. There's nothing you have no idea what's happening. The only thing you're crystal clear is that you just embarrass yourself. And usually you'll be able to deal with it, but for some reasons today you just feel so frustrated, tired, and a bit pissed off. Why? Probably because it's the third time the same thing happens this week. Trying so hard to stop yourself from bursting into laughters, you notice that you need help. But you also notice that no one can help you, because every single one of your friends and family, they're halfway around the world. They can't help you, not even yourself. Now you see, that is a typical case of phase 2, rejection period of culture shock, which many foreigners go through. And as a foreigner myself, I know how painful it can be. So today, after some research, I brought to you this topic, foreigners. Today I would like to inform you about how this topic is related to you, what is culture shock, and I would like to leave you some tips to help you deal with culture shock, and more importantly, how you can help your friend or family deal with culture shock. So first, how does this topic relate to you? Well, let's start with some facts of foreigners. Well, the United States has one of the largest population of immigrants, if not the largest in the world. And think about it. What is immigrants? They're just a bunch of people who are trying to live a life in a foreign country, which means you have a very large population of foreigners here. And according to Homeland Security, in just 2017, there are 1.13 million aliens, which is their phrase for foreigners, obtaining lawful permanent resident status in just 2017. 1.13 million, which means for most of you, not only are you going to come across with a foreigner, you might actually in the future have a close friend or even family who is a foreigner. So, and that is how this topic relates to you. So let's get into culture shock. What is culture shock? According to Harvard University, culture shock is a term that's used to describe the anxieties and feelings felt when people have to operate within an entire different cultural or social environment, such as a foreign country. So, and usually there are 3 phases of culture shock. Phase 1, the honeymoon. 2, the rejection. 3, the recovery. And according to Northwest University, there's a 4th stage, which is called feeling at home. However, it's not exactly culture shock anymore. It's more like after recovery, so I'm not going to cover it today. So in phase 1, the honeymoon, which is when a person will feel very excited, feel like they are on an adventure, and everything seems hopeful. They will have very high expectations, and they will experience temporary euphoria. However, honeymoon usually lasts for no more than a couple days, because they will soon notice that they are an outsider, a foreigner. Which brings them to the second phase, which is called the rejection, because nothing makes sense, because they know that they are a foreigner. So in this rejection phase, it usually takes place soon after the honeymoon wears off. And according to University of Sydney and Northwest University, here are some of the symptoms of phase 2. First, some serious homesick. They will start missing their usual ways or old ways of dealing with everyday life, dealing with our social relationships. And they will start idealizing their old life back home, while being very critical about the new culture. Because for them, nothing in the new culture makes sense. While they're in their old culture, that's how everything is supposed to be. And actually many foreigners who I actually know, met quite a few people who left the host country and go back to their home country because of that. And aside from serious homesick, they will also experience physical and psychological symptoms of culture stress, such as exhaustion, fatigue, or changes in appetite, and small issues may feel like major catastrophes, And they will have feelings of rejection, isolation, and loneliness. If you remember the little story I told you a couple minutes ago, that's exactly what it's talking about. And although this phase 2 actually can last for a long time, however, eventually they will get to phase 3, which is called the recovery, where all these feelings and attitudes will finally go away, many misunderstandings and things can be resolved, and finally the person can regain some self-confidence. Well, as you can see, it would be really nice if you can fast forward from phase 2 to phase 3. So today I'm here to leave you guys with some tips that how you can help yourself or someone, your close friend or family, to go through culture shock. So first, if you are the foreigner, things you might want to do is that, well, let me rephrase that. Things that can really help is that you can keep an open mind. In order to adapt to a new culture, you're going to have to learn a lot about the new place. For me, I had to learn why all the buildings only have 1 or 2 stories in America. I'm not kidding, because that really blew my mind. And things like that is what you have to learn about as a foreigner. So keeping an open mind is extremely important. And aside from that, you might want to try not to isolate yourself. Locking yourself in the room, talking to the walls doesn't exactly help you from adapting, because that's what I did. And finally, according to Harvard University, they actually said that getting to know someone who knows about the culture is actually a very good idea. Well, like, who doesn't want a silly friend who make fun of stuff all the time? And, well, more importantly, if they're local people, they know about the culture. So here are the things you can do to help yourself. And here are some tips that the things you can do to help someone who's going through culture shock, such as, well, you can let them discuss their frustrations and encounters with you, which is a very good way of getting rid of that loneliness and the feeling of helpless. And you can teach them as many as you can about your culture, because it's your culture. Of course, you know a lot more than they do. And finally, this is pretty important that try to expose them with the culture, because it's when you're a foreigner and you know one person who's a local people, it's very easy for you to isolate yourself and basically limit yourself onto only that person, which doesn't really help, because you have to learn about the culture, the environment instead of that person. So you might want to try expose them to your culture and let them wrestle with the differences. Well, as I've said a bit earlier, you guys are probably going to, there's a good chance that you either make a foreigner friend or become a foreigner yourself. So now you know about how this topic is related to you, you know about culture shock and how to deal with culture shock. Not only will you know how to help your friends or family one day, and that you will also know how to adapt to a new culture. I hope one day all this information can be useful for you, and none of you or your family or friends will have to go through what many foreigners went through. And because you have to know, the world, there's so much in the world that you have to explore after you adapt, you got rid of that tension, that hopelessness of culture shock. Thank you.